Inspired by real-life events, narrator Lucas Bennett woke up at 1:36 a.m. inside a government holding facility, with bright white lights burning into his eyes and an intelligence officer saying, "Your digital identity has been linked to an unauthorized cross-border financial intelligence leak involving classified data transfers." And in that instant, his entire life collapsed because just 10 hours earlier, he was a data compliance officer working inside a multinational fintech regulation unit in Washington, D.C., responsible for monitoring transaction integrity and fraud prevention systems. And now he was being treated as a national-level internal security threat. And the first shock wasn't fear. It was disbelief so deep, it felt unreal. Because Lucas had built his entire life on structure, legality, and controlled data systems that were supposed to define trust. But now those same systems were defining him as the breach. And within hours, his access to all federal-linked platforms was revoked. His personal devices seized. His home placed under surveillance restriction, and an internal intelligence report flagged him as primary anomaly in classified data exfiltration chain. And Lucas sat in the interrogation room, replaying his last work cycle, remembering audit reviews, compliance verification checks, encrypted database validation, and then a gap. An unexplained missing 3-hour window where system logs showed elevated clearance activity under his identity across restricted intelligence datasets. But he had no memory of initiating any of it. And when they showed him classified terminal logs displaying his credentials, accessing secured intelligence channels from multiple remote locations simultaneously, Lucas immediately said, "That's not possible. That's not me." But the intelligence officer replied calmly, "The system doesn't recognize absence of intent, only execution traces." And that sentence shattered his understanding of reality, because it meant truth was no longer about what happened, but what was recorded as having happened. And by dawn, he was released under strict federal monitoring, while his identity was already internally marked as compromised across multiple intelligence networks. And outside the facility, Lucas stood in silence, watching a city that still functioned normally while his entire existence had been rewritten inside classified systems. And that night, he received a message through an encrypted intelligence relay channel saying, "If you want to understand the leak, come to Arlington Transit Tunnel Center. No tracking devices." And despite knowing it could destroy what remained of his life, he went. Because when identity is taken away, fear loses meaning. And inside the tunnel, he met Dr. Evelyn Shaw, a former federal cybersecurity forensic architect who specialized in classified breach reconstruction and internal intelligence corruption analysis. And she didn't waste time explaining reassurance. She immediately showed him reconstructed intelligence access chains and said, "Your identity wasn't used directly. It was replicated through a live classified session injection embedded inside the federal authentication matrix." And Lucas instantly said, "Then I can prove I'm innocent." But Evelyn replied, "You're still thinking like someone inside a justice system, not someone inside an intelligence system designed to stabilize narratives, not search for truth." And she explained that the leak wasn't external espionage. It was internal identity replications inside classified authentication layers, where high-level credentials could be cloned in real time and used to access multiple intelligence databases simultaneously while erasing conflicting audit trails. And Lucas's profile had been selected because it had consistent high-level clearance behavior without anomaly flags. making him the ideal attribution point for rapid containment. And suddenly the case wasn't just about data leak. It was about identity weaponization inside federal intelligence infrastructure. And Evelyn offered him a choice: step away and allow the system to finalize him as the classified leak source, or help her trace the internal session replication chain before it was permanently overwritten by federal containment protocols. And Lucas stood in silence, listening to distant tunnel vibrations, thinking about his younger brother serving in the military, thinking about years of disciplined service to structured systems he believed were unbreakable, and thinking about how quickly those same systems can erase a person without physical contact. And finally he said, "If my identity has already been used without me, then I have nothing left to protect except the truth itself." And that decision pulled him into a hidden layer of classified intelligence infrastructure where nothing remained stable, because every log they analyzed was actively rewriting itself in real time. Every trace they followed kept redirecting, as if the system itself was reacting to their investigation. And soon they discovered the breach wasn't foreign infiltrations, but internal classified privilege abuse involving a senior intelligence systems coordinator who'd been quietly rerouting authentication sessions across multiple federal databases to mask large-scale classified data extraction operations. And Luce's identity had been selected as the central attribution point because it aligned with automated trust validation systems used for rapid internal threat classification. And one night, while analyzing live classified authentication streams from a secure offline intelligence node, Lucas saw something that completely shattered his understanding. His credentials were actively accessing classified intelligence archives in real time, while he was physically standing in a disconnected tunnel under federal surveillance, blackout conditions. And Evelyn immediately said, "They are continuously simulating your identity inside the intelligence matrix to preserve the operational narrative." And Lucas realized he wasn't just being accused after the fact, he was being continuously overwritten inside a live classified system. And pressure escalated rapidly as anonymous intelligence warnings began appearing on secured devices, instructing him to terminate investigation or face permanent federal classification as a national threat entity. And sleep disappeared completely. Trust collapsed entirely. And even silence felt like monitored space across federal networks. And at one breaking point, Lucas whispered, "I thought intelligence systems existed to protect truth, but maybe they exist only to control what truth is allowed to exist." And Evelyn replied, "Systems don't preserve truth, they preserve stability of control." And that realization changed everything inside him, because he stopped trying to defend his identity and started focusing only on exposing the mechanism. And as they dug deeper, they uncovered encrypted replication nodes inside classified infrastructure, continuously generating synthetic intelligence audit trails to distribute blame across multiple federal identity profiles. And Lucas's profile had been amplified as the primary attribution target because it reduced internal investigative complexity and allowed rapid containment closure at intelligence level. And when they finally compiled enough verified encrypted evidence to trigger federal oversight escalation, internal containment protocols activated immediately, attempting to erase investigative traces across mirrored intelligence systems. And Evelyn said, "This is where most people disappear without ever being recorded as missing." And Lucas replied, then I'll be the anomaly they can't officially delete. And together, they transmitted secured evidence chains to independent federal oversight channels, while preserving decentralized encrypted backups across isolated nodes. And within days, the investigations escalated into a full federal intelligence corruption probe, exposing identity replication abuse, classified session manipulation, and coordinated internal data extraction operations across multiple intelligence divisions. And arrests followed within senior intelligence infrastructure roles. And when it was over, Lucas stood outside the same federal facility, watching flags move in the wind, realizing that the most dangerous illusion in modern systems is not that they fail, but that they can convincingly assign failure to a single identity and make it look absolute. And a week later, when he met Evelyn for the last time in a quiet underground transit station, she asked him, "What did this change in you?" And Lucas looked at the dim lights reflecting on metal walls and said, "It showed me that identity inside systems is never ownership. It is permission that can be rewritten." And she asked, "And what did you gain?" And after a long silence, he replied, "The understanding that truth doesn't survive inside controlled intelligence systems. It survives only in the people who refuse to accept a version of themselves created without their consent." And as he walked away alone into the structured silence of federal corridors, he finally understood the deepest reality of his journey, that sometimes life doesn't destroy you openly. It quietly replaces you inside a system and waits to see if you accept the replacement. But real survival begins the moment you refuse to live as a version of yourself that was written without your voice.